I'm not the first to point out the obvious parallel that runs between Aemond and Daemon. I mean, GRRM wrote them to be that way. Aemond is an echo of his uncle, an antithesis set up to oppose him. Book readers will know already just how fittingly, how dramatically their stories arc and come to resolution. And remember that Daemon is, or at least was at one point, Martin's favorite character in the entire series.
You know, I'm notorious for my love of gray characters. And one of the grayest characters in the entire history of Westeros is Daemon Targaryen, the rogue prince. Later, he became the husband of Rhaenyra. He switches sides several times. You never know what side he's going to come down on. He's a very colorful and unpredictable character, and I think he has to rank up there as my favorite. But the book is full of what I hope are interesting characters.
I do wonder if it's a positive, resonant sort of bond GRRM has with a character like that, or if he was just answering the question from more of a sort of academic or analytical perspective as a writer or as a moral philosopher or something like that. I, for example, feel like you can love Daemon because of how real he is, how intriguing he is, how much suspense he keeps you in, but then you can still hope a more redeeming character might be possible in the end. Or maybe Daemon will be redeemed, a la Jaime, before Season 8, which is not canon in my head. Maybe that's what makes a fantastic character, but if we're just going off the book and what was given until now, certainly before the show's release, well, mild spoilers, Daemon at the story's conclusion is not much changed. You can poke and speculate at his motives somewhat. You can say he does it all for Rhaenyra's cause. You can say there's no greater purpose for which he could possibly continue fighting. But in the end, it's still the same sort of lone ambition, the same sort of furious moodiness, the same ambivalence towards all concepts of nobility or good. I'm glad the show is taking steps to make him more ambiguous in certain moments, a bit less purely bloody and ambitious, a bit more genuinely tender towards his brother, towards his children, towards his second wife, and so on. They chose a much more nuanced, realistic path for his romance with Rhaenyra compared to the book, where it was described thusly. Princess Rhaenyra was a different matter. Daemon spent long hours in her company, enthralling her with tales of his journeys and battles. He gave her pearls and silks and books, and a jade tiara said once to have belonged to the Empress of Leng, read poems to her, dined with her, hawked with her, sailed with her, entertained her by making mock of the greens at court, the lickspittles fawning over Queen Alicent and her children. But Septon Eustace and Mushroom tell another tale, or rather two such tales, each different from the other. Eustace, the less salacious of the two, writes that Prince Daemon seduced his niece and the princess and claimed her maidenhood. When the lovers were discovered in bed together by Sir Eric Cargill of the Kingsguard, Cargyle, and brought before the king, Rhaenyra insisted she was in love with her uncle and pleaded with her father for leave to marry him. The tale as told by Mushroom is far more depraved, as is oft the case with his testimony. According to the dwarf, it was Sir Criston Cole that the princess yearned for, not Prince Daemon. But Sir Criston was a true knight, noble and chaste and mindful of his vows, and though he was in her company day and night, he had never so much as kissed her, nor made any declaration of his love. When he looks at you, he sees the little girl you were, not the woman you've become, Daemon told his niece. But I can teach you how to make him see you as a woman. He began by giving her kissing lessons, if Mushroom can be believed. From there, the prince went on to show his niece how to best touch a man to bring him pleasure.
And so on and so on.
But when at last she approached her white knight, using all that she had learned, Sir Criston was horrified and spurned her. The whole tale soon came out, in no small part thanks to Mushroom himself. King Viserys at first refused to believe a word of it, until Prince Daemon confirmed the tale was true. "Give the girl to me to wife," he purportedly told his brother. Who else would take her now? Instead, King Viserys sent him into exile, never to return to the Seven Kingdoms on pain of death.
Wed her to me. When I offered up my crown, you said I could have anything. I want Rhaenyra. I'll take her as she is and wed her in the tradition of our house.
You are already wed.
That didn't stop Aegon the Conqueror from taking a second wife.
You are no conqueror. You are a plague, sent to destroy me.
Give me Rhaenyra to take to wife, and we will return the House of the Dragon to its proper glory of
course.
I never liked that too much, if I'm being honest.
Meaning the book version.
I like it as a historic chronicle, different stories, rumors growing, spreading, very realistic. I never liked it in terms of adapting to a story that we're supposed to resonate with. Similar to the blood and cheese sequence, unpopular I know, similar to several others. It serves to shock and titillate. It does perhaps reflect something of how humans exaggerate and mythologize in history, especially in an age when we didn't have such perfect, infinitely replicable transmission of data. But these moments always did more to distance me from the characters, to make them simply obviously lustful or obviously bloody or just dumb in a story and an entanglement when I often felt they could have had more true human tension and nuance, like the Hound or Jaime and so on. It's one of the things particularly about this style of narrative where you're pretty much just focused on events and a few directly quoted interactions or dialogues, and you have to kind of build an idea of the character around that. This is what historians are doing continuously as they pour through old texts, and it's an infuriating process because so much of history across so many cultures, people just didn't really write personal things down all that much. Writing was very hard, literacy was rare. This is one of the reasons the graffiti or vandalism in places like Pompeii is so fun and interesting. I think with my very little historianness, admittedly, that it's supposed to be kind of unique for that. It's written by common people. I've been reading Barbara Tuchman's A Distant Mirror, and one of the things she notes is just how little we know about the basic attitudes between everyday people, between, for example, mothers and children. This is the kind of stuff that makes up our lives, and yet we often only recorded stuff needed for governance and taxation, religion, treaties, dates, and so on. One of the greatest things as literacy explodes, even well before digital, is the ability to just document so much. So sorry for the tangent, but what's the point? The point is that reconstructing history is a tricky task, maybe not even really a task we should undertake in many ways. We're so likely to inject our own sensibilities to really be reinforcing our own paradigms rather than learning from what we're studying. But then reconstructing events or people for narrative fiction like this, we simply have to inject a lot of our own imagination. And I feel like the most interesting, entertaining, and probably the wisest way is to increase nuance and human tension and numerous conflicting motivations in the way they do when they tweak Daemon to be perhaps a bit more loving, perhaps a bit more desperate, perhaps a bit more lonely, and so on. Now, it's interesting to hear that Daemon is GRRM's favorite character because he's so gray. This is interesting because we really aren't given too much in the books, besides this kind of classic, ambitious, clever, warlike, dashing Westerosi hero. There are noble or gentle strengths there, some, but there's a lot of just savage strength of the sort that makes a man survive. Check out my first Daemon video, one of my first, but also by far my most successful video to date. And please, if you do, forgive the bad audio. I was just beginning my YouTube career, and I was recording with a $30 microphone in a yurt. Anyway, he's mostly just bad, conniving, and then some savage strengths of the sort that can also be admirable today if channeled and controlled. Bravery, assertiveness, vision, etc. But does he have the control? Does he have the soft and gentle side? Not much. I know, I'm being extra harsh here, and if George says he's his favorite, I must just be wrong. But that's what I'm trying to get at here. One thing is what exists in an author's head, in the deep well of world building that filters through his mind into his blood, converges so compellingly on that pen tip as he's writing, unless he writes with a modern keyboard. Another thing is what we witness, and before this show, it wasn't much. Daemon was described by Master Yandel as dashing, daring, and dangerous, but mercurial and quick to take offense. Archmaester Gildane wrote that Daemon was ambitious, impetuous, and moody, as charming as he was hot-tempered. I'll note that charisma is a value in Westeros, and those who lack it suffer, from Ned and Theon to Joffrey and Cersei. Daemon is said to definitively improve the City Watch, to better equip and train the men, and to get along with them well, which earns him just loyalty, which will later bear fruits. Oh, it's also worth pointing out that unless I misremember, in the book Mysaria does actually conceive and is carrying his child on Dragonstone, but loses the child in a storm while sailing on the way to Lys, I think. So in the show they tweaked this once again, left it kind of vague, but mostly implied that it was all a trick. I do wish they had given Daemon more warmth overall, but actually, with regards to a few people, that's one of the main strengths we can add to the gentle or noble side of the divide here. He does seem to choose women and to give himself to them, which, I will point out, is a kind of classic legendary thing. The man is called to be strong, to hone his predatory instincts, to have courage in the face of danger, to be willing to enact violence and retribution, but the woman has to tame him, to civilize him. The feminine, in many myths and many motifs across human history, is kind of the driving force of civilization in that way. It's the feminine which enchants the masculine. I know. I don't want to tokenize women or exotify them, but these are archetypes. That's the whole point of why symbols are perpetuated. A symbol is a distilled truth that's simple enough to be perpetuated, and then you tweak it in your life, in your modern society, whatever that may be. When men go wrong, they go wrong in a bloody, vicious, hierarchical, uncivilized way. When women go wrong, it's something else, maybe.
If you ever call me sister again, I'll have you strangled in your sleep.
So men need this enchanting force to captivate them. I mean, why do they talk about a woman's intuition? It's not only because women nurture or mother or gossip and build these social webs that give them a better pulse as to what's going on, although they do that. It's also because they're seen as the life makers, the dark, chaotic heart of nature from which new creation bursts. So yes, the feminine is multifaceted and has many motifs, and none can ever apply to an individual woman. But one of the things the woman has is the power to determine need, and the man will fulfill it. The man is captured by her beauty, her life-givingness, her nurturing, the power of her to see the hidden heart of things and make him tremble. And the woman calls the man to constrain his power in accordance with some structure. She helps him shape and channel it so that violence is used for justice and protection, so that charisma is used for leadership and wise delegation, so that hierarchy is the fatherly seeding of new generations, patriarchy like Ned, like Harwin, rather than the tyranny of fathers like Theon's or Samwell's or maybe Tywin and Otto. Though Tywin and Otto are a bit more complex because they also have this vision for the realm. The legacy is selfish, but they're also justly skilled and right when it comes to a lot of things, a la Varys maybe. Varys is skilled and right, and his true dedication to the realm is obvious, whereas Littlefinger is kind of grasping and conniving, and that's maybe why he dies sooner, although they both die in such dumb ways, and the writing was so diminished at that stage, I don't want to reference it, so forget about it. Just know that I'm right. If you were writing the story, or if I was, or whenever George does release the books, we will all do a better job than D&D did. Don't worry. Anyway, I was talking about Daemon, how he does have this strength of giving himself to women, romantically somewhat. Now, is that psychotic and egotistical because it's just one woman he chooses and glorifies and kills for? Yes, it is somewhat psychotic and egotistic, but less than if he were simply ravaging the countryside on Dragonback, never thinking about having children or a bride, never thinking about legacy. So, actually, the focus on legacy, channeled through a woman he truly loves, is one of the ways Daemon's great capacity for villainy can be constrained. And put that high enough, put it on a throne, surrounded by people who will help stabilize rather than backstab or contest him, and you might get a fantastic king. Of course, you don't want them afraid of him, because that would mean they're not acting honestly, and probably he's a rather fearsome figure, and neither of those are good for the realm long term. So maybe he's a better warring king than a ruling king. But then Viserys was a ruling king, and in his weakness, he planted the seeds for this war that now inherits him.
I named her Heart of Love because I no longer believed.
Believed what, my love?
My obsession killed Rhaenyra's mother.
Viserys.
I thought Rhaenyra was the way out of my abyss of grief and regret. That naming her heir would begin to set things right.
Oh, it did.
I never imagined I would remarry. That I would have a son.
So, it's kind of this dance, but not a dance of dragons, a dance of motivations and character relations. Let's move beyond the women and the romance and the divine feminine and the structure that it brings to the male capacity for devastation. What other strengths does Daemon, perhaps, embody? Well, that's pretty much it. That's what we're given in the books. He's charming, moody, quick-witted, violent, ambitious, charming. He will face Aemond bravely, and the outcome of the battle will be most brave. There's the relationship with Nettles, which is up for speculation. The seductive or manipulative nature of his designs on Rhaenyra are, I would say, suggested more strongly in the books than here in the show. And by our current sensibilities, we'd call that villainous. But in the books, a relationship left more ambiguous and potentially more benevolent could be that with Nettles. So we'll have to see on that. It would be nice to see some warmth there. Spoilers. I will do some mild spoilers here, but nothing insane. My guess is we're ramping up to get to the Dragon Seas within 2 episodes or so. Maybe not. I think the show has been approved for 4 seasons. I don't know if that'll be the last of it. I kind of think 4 is probably a good length for the sort of story arc we have here. Anyway, Nettles is a dragon seed. Basically, the blacks have all these extra dragons sitting around devouring sheep and fish, and they think, why not use them? So they announce that whoever can master a dragon can ride it, so long as they fight for the blacks in the war. And of course, people come flocking, and there's a great hullabaloo and bloodletting, but eventually the 3 previously bonded dragons are claimed. That's Sea Smoke, Laenor's old mount, and Vermithor, the Bronze Fury, Jaehaerys' old mount, and the same dragon Daemon was singing to in the cave, and then Silverwing, the mount of old Queen Alysanne. Well, there were also 3 unclaimed, never-claimed dragons, Grey Ghost, the Cannibal, and Sheep Stealer. Nettles was the least likely of the seeds to have Targaryen blood, yet managed to cajole the wildest, Sheep Stealer, with offerings of sheep, and flew him or her to great effect. Note, I mean the wildest of the claimed dragons, the dragons that end up being bonded. Grey Ghost never is. Cannibal, very vicious, never is. Also, as a small side note, they say it's almost impossible to tell the sex of a dragon, which one of the reasons Mushroom can be doubted, but not entirely dismissed, when he claims Jace's Vermax left a clutch of eggs at Winterfell. Another story point that would have been so cool to unpack further. Why did they skip so much of Jace's journey? That was the big part of his journey. Except in Barth's speculation that the dragons change sex at need, being as mutable as flame, is of course too ludicrous to consider. Anyway, with this Nettles, Daemon is known to be very close. Some say romance, some say father-daughter, whatever the case, as the episodes aren't yet released, we can speculate that they might continue to take Daemon in a sympathetic direction. The stuff with Rhaenyra in Season 1 was rather well done. It leaves room for speculation and sympathy, while definitely conveying some level of manipulative cunning. Maybe we'll move things further in some direction or another with Nettles. Maybe he recognizes a fellow adventuring spirit. He wants her to have the freedom and power a dragon can bring her without the toil and tragedy that he suffered for his birth and his familial struggles. Those of you who read the books know how Nettles turns out, and Daemon. It's very open-ended. They could take this in almost any direction they wish. Maybe she's just a great person. Maybe she's the daughter he could never have, although he does have pretty awesome daughters, so maybe not. Maybe he's relieved to be around someone who doesn't fear him.
Because of your virtue.
How dare you?
Or did he merely use you as a tool to put me in my place because he was afraid of me? Because he knew your legacy, unlike mine, would never outshine his own?
He was not afraid of you, Daemon! He could not trust you.
Someone who doesn't fear him, someone who trusts him, someone unburdened by it all. Whatever the case, the point of this entire video is that there's potential. Things are open-ended in many ways because of the historic chronicle ambiguity nature of this novel. Daemon does do a couple unexpectedly loyal things. There are hints that he grows weary of throne-seeking at some point and becomes fueled by a more personal drive for challenge or freedom or dragon battle. I suppose we could consider these admirable if we were 8th century Norsemen spinning stories to ourselves while wandering the dark of Scandinavia. And there's a timeless admirability to that. This is the sort of hero he is. We've already seen the teaser for episode 3, and it has him marching around in what seems to be Dark Harrenhal, slaying guys up close, said to be gone missing by Rhaenyra's counselors. This is the sort of hero he is. He's made to wander dark Scandinavia, to fight foes that are larger than life, to charm seductress witches. Oh yes. Can I just pause again to say how great it is that they designed Caraxes in this way? I'd love to see a bit more variation with the other dragons, but Caraxes certainly steals the show in terms of just having that wilder, more sinuous, more snake-like uniqueness. Then there are other moments they seem to have actually made Daemon more outright savage or psychopathic than in the book, primarily with the killing of his first wife, Lady Royce, and with his beheading of Vaemond Velaryon. In the books, remember, this is Rhaenyra's doing. It's written that the princess was not slow in answering this charge. She dispatched Prince Daemon to seize Sir Vaemond, had his head removed, and fed his carcass to her dragon, Syrax. So Rhaenyra's made is more sympathetic, Daemon's made more bloody. Of course, with our modern audience here in America, we just love that. He's charismatic, he's a bad boy. Wow, so seductive. And there's this appeal of self-assured men who know who they are, know, therefore, who they can trust and why. Note that it's not strictly more honorable men, at least not men who recognize and pursue honor. Honor is just one vector, often a harmful vector, but not if paired with enough strength or true cunning. We've seen honor triumphant in Westeros several times. We've seen it in the book version of Jon, who even ends the TV show somewhat prosperous, despite how they butchered his character. Note that in the books he's not this fuddy-duddy, indecisive, my queen guy who just stands around and grunts as chaos descends. In the books he's capable, charismatic, and cunning, and ruthless, and he takes all the honor he learned from his dad, Ned, and dominates by combining it with other things he learns on the way. Yes, he's still stabbed at this point, which is a certain form of defeat, but we'll have to see what happens in the end. We've seen honor win in Sir Davos, in Tyrion, as he develops a sense of vision aimed elsewhere than his father and the obsessive desperation for family legacy and acceptance. We've seen it in Jaime, if they had given him the storyline he deserved. As far as I'm concerned, Jaime and Brienne ended up together, and until Martin contradicts this himself in the novels, if the novels are ever finished, that will be my headcanon. That's where the threads of the character were going. That's how the arc falls. That's what the story is. We did not see enough to believe any of the supposed relational tension they conveyed in the last few episodes. His ultimate choice to go to Cersei. This is where writing goes off the rails so badly, it cannot be accepted. It does not make sense. The logic is not there. It's not a true story. Look, guys, the story exists beyond the writer. It's not the truth of mathematics. It's not the truth of history. It's the sort of idea that's embodied, acted out, and realized in the human experience, the human individual, life after life after life, rather than out there in the ether of natural law or binary logic. The essence or the components, the building blocks of a story exist between us, outside of us already. They're in the fabric of reality and how we are designed. The author sees them in his or her own clear way, draws them in, and makes them something.